Well, we're going to talk about the challenges of the church in the post COVID world and what that really means and how we can mitigate these things and how we can move forward and do better. Um, First thing we have to understand is that things will not be like they were uh, in 2019, and things will not be like they were in 1980 or 1960 or 1950 or 1940 or 1930 or 1920, um, or even 1860. Looking to the past will leave you sadly disappointed. Um, let's be real. Um, Technology is growing very fast. Information is flowing at a faster rate than any time in history. Uh, Society is becoming far more educated. Uh, the type of jobs people have are going to be vastly different than they have been in the past. And even with other areas of the country that are 10, 20, 30 years behind most of the country, or at least the areas of the country that are the cutting edge right now, uh, this is going to continue and this is going to be the trend. And it's not going to take 10, 20, or 30 years for these areas to catch up. Nowhere close to that. The most you're looking at is in some areas 2 to 5 years at the most, and probably faster than that. Uh, and but what we have to look at is we have to establish things. Okay, the things that change in the country. Okay, we have the internet. Technology is moving quickly. We have different types of supply chains that companies are doing, different types of manufacturing with automation, different education system, which means more people can get access to education, and we have much faster, more hybrid financial system than we used to have before. And all those things change the way the economy works. So, because of supply chains, some manufacturing comes back, but the jobs don't come with it. Because, like people we talk in industry forums that I've been a part of, there are people saying they're bringing back factories that when they were in the United States in 1990, they were employing 525 people, and now they're going to employ. At first they were going to employ 5, but now it's going to be 6 for the whole plant, because everything's being done by machines and robots. And the people that are there, based on inflation, are getting paid less than their counterparts were back in 1990. Because those aren't the jobs that are the high-paying jobs. You look at how China's doing it, it'll give you kind of an example about how that works. China's looking towards Cambodia and Thailand and Africa for the places that they're not automating. And the only reason the companies that aren't automating, they're getting outsourced out of China by their American partners or other countries' partners, because the issue is the Chinese just don't want to pay the money to the equipment to do the automation. In those cases, not all. And then there's the supply chain considerations. But even if the Chinese see that the manufacturing is not where the money is anymore, and they see that creates a lot of social and internal problems for them, and they're trying to change into a different direction. They also want to keep the elites well financed. So that's the issue with the jobs. So where the jobs are is they're in areas where there's a great deal of technology and innovation, and there's the other areas are things certain things in finance, certain things in investing, and then you have certain types of real estate, but not all real estate. And then you have the issue with so these all these empty storefronts you're seeing, they're not going to be filled back up with neighborhood retailers anytime soon. And so what this all amounts to is that attacking education in what will be increasingly a more educated society is an even bigger losing strategy for some people's approach. I think in the long run, and I think that the culture war always was a losing proposition, because you're automatically alienating people from your flock instead of opening the doors and uh, it's a demographic map to disaster. And the other thing about it is that as Christians we're supposed to build bridges, not walls. And what seems to be really, whether it's intentional or not, what has actually been done by the leadership in a lot of the church in the past 40 years has been a strategy of maintenance instead of a strategy of growth. We may talk about growth, but even if you look at the mega churches, their growth is to go out and seek other church people. They may say, well, we have this type of service or that type of service, but the bottom line is everybody knows there are Christian Latinos, there are Christian African Americans. We're not going out trying to build a service for atheists or for agnostics or for Hindus or Buddhists or we're trying to get people who have some type of a Jesus background, and we're trying to cater to them and trying to appeal to them with the type of thing that touches their culture and their idiosyncrasies, so that we have something that we're familiar to work with. Because we don't like unfamiliarity, and we don't like uncertainty. And we're afraid of things that we don't understand or don't know. So we oppose them and try to isolate ourselves. And it doesn't, in the end, it doesn't work, because you start to run out of people. They get old and they die, and their kids don't have really any interest in being like their parents, because they kind of see the dysfunction and the problems that go along with it, and the conflict that's created with all the division, because we forget that we have a living God. But the thing about these changes is that every areas will have to continue a lot of the same, but with some minor changes to be a little bit more, to be more open to getting some of these people in the fold. But at the same time, they'll have to have the parallel program for the future already in place, already taking place, so that they don't miss the train. And that's going to mean things like continuing streaming, online streaming. I know budgets are hurting, so if you don't have a good budget, use YouTube. Do YouTube. If you have an internet connection, find somebody who has a good data plan who can afford it, or take turns and stream it off of your cell phone. It has a high speed one, and if you, because YouTube is really the way to do it. And I think even if you have some type of a service you're paying for, doing the parallel like a lot of people do already is really the way to go, because that way your service is out there online and people can see you and get familiar with you. Having the social media presence in general is a very good thing. Maybe your church should look at getting a Twitter and getting your people to follow the Twitter, and getting your friends also who don't go to your church elsewhere around the country follow your Twitter, so you can do short little tweets with maybe scripture, or post a video, or post something out there, like a meme, a Christian meme or something, just to get people familiar with your church, and do an opera invites. Learn about hashtags on all social media platforms that have them. Your staff should have LinkedIn presence. You should have Instagram. You should have Pinterest in addition to Facebook and Twitter. Your staff should also have personal Facebook, Twitter pages. And you should have, of course, everybody should have a website by now if you don't have one. If you're not really savvy at editing and stuff and don't want to pay people, there are some really easy platforms to put up a website, like Weebly. Some of my websites are on Weebly. I don't use my name or any of my stuff on it. Like a lot of my stuff, I don't do it because I don't want to. I try to compartmentalize, because I don't want to be one of these hypocrites out there trying to who is always selling out Christianity. So I don't want to have a name behind it. So I avoid that. I'm building this, and this is going to take time to build, because of the amount of censorship that's going to be given, because I'm not normative. And in social media, and that's important when you're building yourself, you need to be groundbreaking and truthful, but you also need to be careful, because one of the big key things with censorship is that the advertisers want to get rid of anything that's not normative, because it complicates their marketing. And so that drives a lot of the censorship. It's not one side or the other, it's really that. And They don't want anything that goes too much against the grain. Another thing is you need to make sure that your finance infrastructure, you need to make sure you have some type of online pay. You need to make sure it's a secure platform that's well trusted and rated. You need to make sure the banking system that you have is secure and but also has a lot of advantages. A lot of these little, I know everybody's denomination loves them, but a lot of these little investment funds and stuff, those accounts are probably not the best. And I'll make a lot of money saying this for the actual church itself, because they're not as large, and that's not always the best thing, but that is sometimes is an issue. The other thing is they don't have the same type of infrastructure as a large bank, and the lending power is different, and there's advantages, but I understand that the denominational pressure people face. The other thing is, learning how to use apps on your phones with all your staff and people in meetings. Productivity apps, as they're called, are very good. They keep calendars and notifications, even files sometimes, and using file sharing apps so you can share files with people and links that are public. So you can share information, so you can create booklets and training materials and find study materials and things online. I have hundreds of thousands of texts from tablets and papyri and parchment and other stuff, all kinds of other learning materials and things that I've had for a very long time, many years, and it's helpful understanding certain things from a scriptural standpoint and from the church history and everything else. And the other thing, and you can do this with a lot of other things though. Like I have things to do, teach me to do technical things, and there are videos where you can learn how to do things that you may not need to do, because you need to learn certain leadership techniques and communication techniques and writing techniques, and even the technology techniques, because if you don't have the money to hire the people, or even if you do know how to do it, it's always changing, so you can keep learning. So that's very important, because you need to have a lot of tools at your disposal to address every situation. The other thing is you have Zoom. Zoom costs over after 40 minutes, but last time I checked, Skype doesn't, and it has enough. It allows enough participants to have a Bible study. So that's important, or a small group even. And the advantage of doing the online service is you're no longer confined to your area. People can watch your service from all over the world. They go to your online giving, share with you, contribute to the church online. They can go to your Bible studies from pretty much anywhere, and be a part of your church. When I was in LA for 10 years, people were using Skype. When I first moved there, I knew they were doing big business all over the country and the world, to the point where it didn't make sense for them to travel all the time or to live in one place. And they did it with video conferencing, file sharing, and emails and messaging, and sometimes phone calls. But it allows you have a lot of tools when you start integrating the apps and stuff, and one person can do what an army could do in the past, and it makes you very powerful. I think some of the areas that are slower, these things are going to take up time, because people in very simple areas are going to have a hard time doing things like Zoom and Skype, or the online service, or adapting a lot of these other tools. But they'll have to, because they're going to start needing to do more and more for work. For example, if you're a contractor and you've got to talk to clients for a job you're going to do, you might not have time in the future to make it worth your while to go out to every single client. So you might have to have somebody, go around with a camera and show the site, then talk to them, and then come out later and do the rest of the work. You might have to talk to clients about stuff that you're doing or have been doing, and you may not be able to have time to go across town to sit down and talk to them. So you do it over. You do some type of conference, even things like that, and it also, all the other things I talk about increase and make it easier to get paid, and for you to pay other people. You can use things like Zelle, which is like the financial institution's version of PayPal, and you can pay somebody to do a painting job, or they can pay you to do it, and you get paid instantly, and there's no checks involved or anything. It goes from Zelle, and then it goes right in your bank account, and it's done. But the other thing that's going to happen is we're going to have digital currency soon, whether you like it or not. I don't think it's a mark of the beast thing, but the way things are working in the financial world, just like communism and socialism have died out because it's an impossibility anymore, the way the world system. Oligarchy is really the way now, but as far as the more dark side, it could be right or left, but it's because of the way the finance works. The advantages is it gets rid of the tax fraud, and it gets rid of a lot of crime and other types of fraud, and most of it's set up to where you're guaranteed a bank account. It's not like they're going to take your bank account away or bully you, but it has advantages, and there are some disadvantages, but no more than there are right now. I think these are all considerations. I think the demographic changes are the most profound thing, because we're going to see a lot more people from Asia, a lot more people from Africa, and a lot more people from Europe even. And the new immigrants are far more, they're educated. In the past, a lot of people in the South and the Midwest think of immigrants as being lower class, working class people with very little education. Now the way the immigration system has been set up, it's kind of a role reversal. And it's whether it was a deception by the politicians, or it was an accident based on the stances they were taking. It's what's happened. So, and then there's advantages of coming here. So a lot of these people come here already with wealth and money. That's how you see, when I was in LA, you see a lot of these communities change so quickly. And in other cities, this has happened too. Because what happens when those people start coming in, there's three. I don't mean to say that in a derogatory way, but what happens is that there's 3 to 5 times the median income that they come in with they make, and then they have vast savings because they come from places like Hong Kong and Paris and Dubai and London and Berlin and so they come in and they have, from the place that they used to live, or from their savings, they have a couple million in the bank. Some of them have a lot more than that. And then they have education. And they can easily buy the house that they want, get the job they want, or they can even start a business what they want, or buy somebody else's business. And or they can even keep the job they had before, because they work online. And this works. And they can do it because some of them do it through the investor visa. You buy a home, you buy something else, and you contribute to the economy. Now you get a green card, and that's statutory. And I was in a neighborhood that was almost all multi-generational, working class Salvadoran when I first moved to LA. And in a little over a year, that had changed, and it was different immigrants from the Philippines, China, and a few other places, and white people and African Americans who were all professionals or somehow made money and decided to move there and moved in, and that's kind of how the trend that occurs, and very quickly, almost overnight, the neighborhood just starts very quickly changing. And this neighborhood had been very stable, like it was for 30 or 40 years. So you can't change these types of trends. The best thing we can do is just to live with God and adapt and overcome the situation. I've never been adverse to working with any different types of people. Uh, I've lived in. Uh, I grew up in a city around this. I grew up in the suburbs. I didn't grow up in the suburbs. I was born in the suburbs. I was raised and grew up in the city, in in a in an urban area that was more of either I have different areas. Some were black and some were of an Appalachian background. And in the black areas, I was interested in it. I didn't like the Appalachian background too much, and then I went into, and then I went to, then I went in the military, where I was around a lot of different types of people. The military's demographics are very different. They're the same trends you get with the younger people, except they don't come from the Midwest and the South anymore. A lot of them, they come from the cities, even in the Midwest cities, of course, and the South cities, but the culture is becoming very different. But and then after my military, I moved back to the Midwest a little while, in the city, and then I went to Los Angeles, and it was interesting there. I mean, and a very diverse population, pretty much every country and language in the world you can find there, and but what I saw is the type of all along the way as I saw where things were heading, and but I lived in L.A. I've lived in areas of my life that were predominantly almost all Jewish and gay. I've lived in areas that were primarily Latino. I've lived in areas that were predominantly Muslim. I've lived in areas that were predominantly Asian. And I've lived in areas that were predominantly African American, and I've lived in some white areas. And I think a lot of people's phobias are kind of a boogeyman, and we've kind of created a culture that's polarized and tribal, and it's just a big Frankenstein that's going to destroy itself. And we need to let go of some things, let go of some of the things that we see as opportunity, and look for the real, better opportunity, and look for the future. And the best way is to become much more versatile, much more flexible, and become much more tolerant and open to different types of people. And that's where the future is.